Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you guys so much for joining us here for another episode, wherever in the world you are listening to us from, whatever platform you're listening to us on. As I say every episode, thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you for the support. Thank you for the kind messages. Keep those coming and keep sharing this podcast with those who you know who would find these conversations interesting and informative. And this is one that definitely will fit the bill, especially because this is going to be talking, obviously, all these topics are talking about basketball in some sense. And as my guest and I kind of talked about, that the sport itself doesn't really change too much. It's still basketball at the end of the day, but we're going to kind of highlight and spotlight the rural basketball experience, talking about what that experience means in the community, the way the brand of basketball is played, and just kind of talk about what basketball is played like and what it sort of means in the areas of maybe our country that don't necessarily get all of the attention or spotlight on them, and just kind of get a feel of what it's like in our guest program and what the community he's in, and beyond that also just to maybe open some eyes and some ears for those of you who might be considering a move to a more rural area, or who might have that coaching opportunity at a more rural area, and you might be a little, hesitant or a little bit on the fence about whether that's going to be the right position for you, or you just kind of want to know a little bit about, what's it like if I'm out in that area. This would be something great for you, or if you know somebody in that situation, this one will definitely be great for you too. So we'll be talking some basketball and talking about what it's like specifically in the rural experience, in my guest's experience. So I'm very happy to be joined by the head boys basketball coach at North Douglas High School. My guest today is Coach Jesse Leman. Coach, thank you guys so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. As we talked about, I am pretty certain that you are the first guest that I have had from the particular area that you are going to mention. So we're going to be breaking a little bit of new ground here, talking about some parts of the country we haven't really gotten to yet. So let's go ahead, Coach, with your basketball journey, your coaching journey. I know you've had a couple moves along the way. So where's the game taking you? Where's the coaching journey taking you that led you up to North Douglas?
Yeah, well, I guess my coaching journey started right after high school, year out of high school. I was born and raised in Alaska, and as soon as I graduated high school, I tore my ACL my senior year, and so while I was recovering, I wanted to stay in the game, and I got a job at coaching C team or JV2 as it's called somewhere, other places, C team in Alaska, at the school I graduated from. So 19 years old and get this C team job, and that was my intro into it. I had kind of assisted some junior high teams or middle school teams when I was in high school, but not a whole lot of responsibility there. And so this was kind of my first taste into having my own team, so to speak. And then from there, I went back to school and worked a lot of jobs, a lot of different jobs. Was in the commercial fishing industry for a lot of years. And then a friend of mine got a head coaching job and asked me to assist him. And this is also up in Alaska. And so I said, yeah, why not? And so I jumped on as his assistant. And from there, still a commercial fisherman. So my winters were pretty free. My summers were when I would work. He got a job down coaching in Oregon at Cottage Grove High School and asked me if I wanted to follow him down there. And I said, yeah, sure. And so I followed him down there, was his assistant there, coached the JV team there. And then I ended up staying in Oregon, and he went back up to Alaska, and I found the job at North Douglas High School a couple of years later, and that's where I'm at now in Drain, Oregon.
And as you mentioned, you had your upbringing in Alaska, and you are, I'm fairly certain, the first guest I've had who's had any connection to the state of Alaska. So, not to put you on the spot, make you speak for the whole state, because I know there's a lot of variety, and not one experience encompasses everyone's experience in that state. But with your upbringing in Alaska, what experiences did you have growing up through sports and playing sports, or just maybe being in that part of the country that you think were maybe unique, or experiences that you think others may have not have had compared to the experiences you've had?
Yeah. So, I think it's probably safe to say that most people have an opinion of Alaska that it's cold and kind of desolate, and that's a lot of that's true. Not all of it's true, but where I grew up, it was pretty mild, so it wasn't 50 below zero like you see on TV. But I grew up in a little town called Ninilchik, Alaska, a small fishing village, less than 1,000 people, but on the roadway, so it didn't feel as remote as a lot of other places up there. But that we would play, we'd play against places that had 300 people and no road in, no road out. But we were on the roadway, and there was a small airport, 50 miles away, and Anchorage, the biggest city in Alaska, 3 hours drive away. So it didn't feel to me like it was so remote, and it probably to everybody else that might feel very remote. But it might surprise you. I think a lot of people would associate Alaska with hockey, which is it's partly true, but in my opinion, basketball was always the state sport. You'd get
Interesting.
Yeah, you'd get in the winters, especially in those cold parts of the state. But even where I was, the gym was the warmest building. The gym was open. That's where the school was where everybody was at, and so the gym would be open and was a safe haven for a lot of people. Myself in particular, I grew up. My uncle was the girls basketball coach at our high school, and they were very good. And so I would always be in the gym, watching, not just supporting the school, but supporting family. And so, I felt like I was raised in the gym and going to practices. Yeah, sure. and that's makes a big impression on a young kid. So for me, I just devoured the game. I loved it. We had 4 TV channels growing up, NBC, CBS, and Fox, and PBS, right? And so 3 of those were showing sports all the time. So I was just obsessed with sports. My lovely parents, they were not strict, but the one strict rule they had, one of them was that I couldn't play violent video games. And so which in hindsight, great. So I had all these sports video games. So I was obsessed, and so I had, all the NBA Live and stuff like that. And so I was a basketball fanatic. And I don't know. This is kind of a roundabout way of answering. I don't even know if I answered your question at all, and I don't even remember what it was. But
well, it's different. Well, what I think it's interesting to think of. What you mentioned is that I don't think a lot of people necessarily think of Alaska as a basketball haven, or an area where basketball is necessarily king or queen. But as you mentioned, it's probably a lot nicer condition wise to be playing basketball in the winter than it is
absolutely
to be other places and other locations. And for sure.
And it means, it means a lot to the communities up there. They all come out and support the teams, and for them too. It's, it's a nice warm place to be, right? And a lot of times it's like the entertainment in town. So the high school basketball games. So the fans in villages are very passionate about their teams. They travel really well.
Mm-hmm.
And as you can imagine, a lot of people probably don't know that Alaska is the largest state in the United States, but
Yeah, it is,
we would travel to all corners of the state. And I mean, we had a region opponent that was 400 miles away. You could only get there by plane, which is absurd, and we had others that you could only get to by ferry. And I mean, that part is very unique.
Yes.
And not unique to just Alaska, but uncommon certainly for the rest of the states. And yeah, it's probably surprising to a lot of people that the basketball means so much. Now, that being said, population wise, Alaska's got it's one of the smaller states population wise.
Mm-hmm.
And so the level of basketball may not be as high, but there have been plenty of great players to come out of there, and they're only getting better up there. So I'm sure we'll see more and more great things out of Alaska basketball.
And I'm sure those players who, move on to play in the contiguous or the lower 48, they probably enjoy the travel maybe a little bit more once they get over here. Maybe they enjoy just taking some quick bus rides over.
It's easier. It's easier. Even now, as I coach now, anytime we have a game where we travel, I'm like, oh yeah, this isn't too bad. And everyone just, is dreading it and going, oh, this is fine.
Yeah, we don't have to leave the ground here and
right.
go up in the air at all in order to do that. Yeah, it's interesting to think of, probably for a lot of the players there, that's just kind of the normal thing. It's just kind of what you're used to. But I even still, I imagine the level of dedication that those players would have to have, and the commitment level that they would have to have in order to be involved in sports, because those are, I can imagine just some real long days that have to be put, especially for student athletes growing up, middle school, high school, to be putting in that amount of time to travel, and then to play, and then to come back, and then still focus on schoolwork. Like, I can imagine, like, you have to be all in, and you have to be committed and really be about it to have like a really positive, good experience.
Right. Yeah. And and I know it's how it is a lot of places where people commute to school and commute to work, but a lot of times the commute can be longer up there. For us, the nearest town with a high school was 35 miles away. So if you weren't going, I mean, there was a high school in my town, but if you weren't going to that one, the closest option was 35 miles away.
Yeah.
So, that's a bit of a commute. It's doable, but it does make for long days, and plenty of people did it. They're doing it now. I know my buddy's up there coaching, and he's got kids coming from that don't have a program at their school, and they got a co-op team up there. So they've got kids coming from other schools.
And I will say, to kind of put a bow on this before I forget, one of the things that I imagine, and I'm not sure how familiar you might be with this in particular, but I imagine with, things kind of being spread out a little bit and things kind of being far apart, that a lot of coaches probably know each other like statewide, whereas here in the Phoenix area it's very like regional. I know a lot of the coaches in the Phoenix area, but I don't know where people are in other areas of the state necessarily. But I imagine with so much travel and so much back and forth, like those coaches, especially those who put in a lot of time somewhere in Alaska, they're probably familiar with basketball all over the state, and all the coaches all over the state and all the areas. Like you're kind of a statewide entity versus the more regional stuff that maybe I'm used to.
Yeah. And I mean, there's, I'm sure there are more schools in Phoenix than probably the whole state of Alaska combined.
Probably.
So, it's not a fair comparison in that regard, but yeah, I mean, there's, up there, they also have like a big summer camp where most of the teams attend, most of the state teams attend. So, you get to see them at state tournaments, you get to see them at season tournaments, and then in the summer, and you get to know, people through the years, and a lot of them stay in that position for a long time. And so it's pretty cool in that regard. It's kind of I don't know that it's a brotherhood that's any different than any other state, but it does feel a little more close knit up there.
Yeah, really interesting. Going back to your area now that you made your way down here to the lower 48 out there in Oregon. Let's kind of set the stage of where you kind of see basketball in your area. What is the importance of it in your area out there in Drain, Oregon? What would you describe as kind of like the successes, or maybe the strengths? Strengths might not be the best word, but the successes that you feel like you have ongoing in your area, and any sort of like challenges or any things that you're kind of working through to kind of build up the program and build up maybe basketball in general.
Yeah. So I can't help but compare to, when being in Oregon to when I was in Alaska, because those are the two things I know best. And I will say it was a bit of a shock, going to a place that's the same size here, but gosh, they have, plenty of sports available. Whereas the school I attended, had a handful. They had cross country team, which was in a, different time, but no baseball team, no football team.
Mm-hmm.
The school here, they've got a baseball team, they've got a football team, and so there's just more programs, and that is great. I love it for the kids, but also being the only real game in town up there with basketball, or certainly plenty of kids excel at cross country and track and field, but basketball is typically considered a more popular sport. And since this is a basketball podcast, I don't think I'll hurt anybody's feelings by saying
Probably
that.
not.
But here, we all share kids, of course, with between programs. So when they're in football season or when they're in baseball season, sometimes that can be a challenge of like, oh gosh, I want you to get into the gym and get some shots up, or something like that, and vice versa. When a football coach is wanting to get a basketball kid to play 7-on-7 or whatever during basketball season, we all kind of have to share, and so that can be on the one hand, it can be a challenge. It can be a success too. You get these multi-sport athletes that I think it ultimately makes them better at all these sports, all these other sports. Being a good basketball player can translate onto the football field, and vice versa. So I'm not, it's not a challenge in that I'm not frustrated with it by any means.
Sure.
But if I could have the gym open year round, we would have a better basketball team, I'm sure. So in that way, it can be a challenge, but it's also, I don't know that it's in the immediate area, at least. I don't know that it's the most popular sport, and there are plenty of
not yet.
Not yet. And it may be in our school. I mean, there's a few that are really successful, but in the area, I know, like the school down the road, they got a really great football team, and the other school down the road's got a really great wrestling program. And so I think it's kind of a mixed bag here. I still think basketball is plenty popular, and the community is supportive of whatever sport we're in. The community comes out in full force. Our community, especially, I can speak to personally. I know, I mean, we travel so well when we're out on the road. We were lucky enough to be at the state tournament last year, and it just felt like a home game. We had so many people that weren't even parents that were there. So
That's really cool. I hear
Yeah, so
that.
we have a lot of community support, and that, is success, isn't it? I mean, uh, winning is great, but gosh, to have everybody involved and supporting you, that's what it's all about. That's what high school sports
And one
is all about.
something that I'm curious if you're aware of. I don't know if this is, outside of your scope, or how much you're aware of this, but in your area in Drain, does it tend to be where you have kind of generational families there, where people who are living there, that their families
Yes,
live there? So
absolutely.
then it's perhaps a possible situation then the players within your program might still be in the area like after you're gone as well, versus like in a major city where kids, they scatter all over the place and you don't really
Right.
have
Yeah.
that sort of like neighborhood type area, like kind of like you do.
Yeah. So I know a lot of the parents have either graduated from here in at North Douglas or down the road at Young College. There's a lot of uh, people who have stayed in the area, and I'm sure a lot of the kids that I coach will come back. They'll probably, like any small town kid, they'll probably be like, "I got to get out of here,"
Yeah,
and
sure, sure.
then they'll end up here. I mean, that's I ended up in a town that's very similar to the one I grew up in, and that's a
Yeah,
lot of times that's how it works. So
sure.
I sure hope so. And yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. There's a lot of families that are drained through and through. That's for sure.
And I will say, kind of as like kind of an add-on, something I think would maybe a bit of a challenge. It's a really cool thing, I think, for the most part, but it is maybe slightly a challenge, or at least something that you'd have to be aware of. And you can certainly speak to like your experience with this, is like that there is no hiding necessarily. There is no like blending in. Like everyone I feel like in the community or in the area like knows who it is that's the basketball coach. You're probably recognized, or they know who you are, and it's one of those things where maybe it's not necessarily a challenge, but like it's just something that you're aware of, that like your movements or your actions, or maybe the things that you say or do or work with your program, like almost like everybody's going to be aware of it, or it's going to like get around eventually.
It, this may be me being naive, but I feel like I don't know most of the
Maybe
people
not.
here in town. Yeah, I don't know, and but I am. I mean, I am new to the area, so I took over a couple. Let's see, this year was my second year coaching, so I moved in right before I started coaching. So I've been here for 2 years, but I don't know everybody, but I am working in the school, so I mean, I know all the kids. Um, but yeah, there's probably maybe they know me and I just don't know them. I don't know. Now I feel terrible. You might have to edit that out, but
Well,
I I will
it's
say
you can't
this.
blend. I guess I guess going with that is, I feel like once you get to know somebody and they get to know you, it's probably like maybe in a community in an area like that, I imagine a lot of people in Drain, and I'm not stereotyping any small community, but I imagine that typically compared to big cities, they probably don't meet a lot of like new people. So once somebody like does meet you or knows you and
Right.
knows where you work at, it's like, okay, I know who that person is now. Like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
not going to get lost in the
I'm
shuffle, sort
sure.
of
I'm
thing.
sure it's
Yeah.
that way. Yeah. Though I'm super boring. I don't think anybody would would be like, "Oh, what's the coach doing
Yeah,
out at,
yeah, yeah. That's
what's
funny.
what's he doing out on the town?" No, I go to the store, the school, and my house, and so yeah, it's not all that exciting when people see me out.
And no dirt to dig up on you, huh?
No, no.
No, that's funny. Um, are there any? We actually kind of talked about this with your situation in Alaska, and now in Drain, but some unique situations that maybe like your players experience by being in a rural environment versus like being in a bigger city. Are there certain experiences or certain things that they go through? I kind of know we talked about like the multi-sport aspect, but are there any other experiences that kind of come with living in a more rural, smaller environment that your players just either have to get accustomed to, or they just have to just sort of work through or deal with, or just comes with the rural environment experience that they may not have being in a bigger city?
I mentioned the travel, and that was,
Hmm.
it goes for Oregon as well. There's like our state tournament was on the east side of the state, and Oregon's not a small state. It's pretty good size. So it ended up being 6+ hour drive over there. I mean, there's a little bit of travel here too. And so that part is both fun and kind of taxing. You don't want to have to have, well, I guess not jet lag, but be road weary.
There you go, yeah.
Get your legs under you before the game. You don't want to have to worry too much about that. But travel is kind of unique here. I don't know how it is for you down there, but I would imagine that it's probably pretty easy to get from A to B.
Depends on the traffic jams, but
yeah,
in theory,
yeah. And gosh, that's such an Alaskan thing of me to. I'm like, what's that? Traffic? We didn't even have a street light where I'm from, so
traffic.
we didn't have that either. But
funny.
Like another almost all my players have full-time summer jobs, and being out in the country.
How does that affect your summer work? Before I forget to ask, how does that affect any plans? I know we talked off air about your summer.
To be determined, I guess.
So we'll see how that goes in.
And my hope for it is, and because it's pretty loose, and we're pretty loose with it, that at least I'll have 5. I'm hoping. So
there you go.
Hopefully everybody, and I would plan on it. If everybody showed up, everybody would get equal playing time because it's summer, and that's where you get better. And this way, I'm sure there will be games where people won't be able to make it, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, I guess. But a lot of these kids, they work grew up on a farm or a farm type environment. So they might, be bucking hay at a certain time of year, in July, or they might be. I got a couple kids that work at a family gravel pit. I actually have one that fishes commercially in Alaska. And so a lot of these jobs are they're all day kind of things. And you get a pretty good work ethic when you do stuff like that. So even though sometimes they might miss some basketball in the summer, I know that they're working hard, and I know that they can handle running up and down the court when it's conditioning time. They won't gripe at me too much. So and I guess as it a unique struggle might be that in the city there's almost always a game going, right? You go down and find a place to play pretty easily. I'm assuming. I don't know. You can answer that.
I will say, Phoenix in the summer. That's one little difference. You get to certain areas in the summer, you can be outside playing all day. Here in the desert. In Phoenix in the summer, options get a little more limited with that. But inside, you're gonna have to fight for space inside because everyone has the same idea and the same. But I will say, to kind of flip that though, that does make one of the interesting byproducts of that is that it makes people, they want to come in the gym in the summer. They're like, where else are you going to go to play? Hey, it's kind of like you said about winter basketball. It's kind of the same thing here. It's like, you're going to come in the gym. It's the nicest place to be in the summer. So
this isn't hyperbole, but I think I would die of heat stroke down there in the summer. But yeah, like conversely, we don't, it's like the stars have to align for us to get everybody at the gym in the summer. I mean, it's usually somebody's out doing something, working, or they want to go play because it's the summer, and understandably they want to be with their friends or girlfriends or whatever. But it's really hard to get them all in the same place and to get them together for an open gym. So that can be unique.
Interesting about the work thing that you mentioned. I think that is probably different than experiences I go through and other coaches have been through as well. As I know that I've had girls who work, but their work is not what I would consider necessary for like working for the family necessarily, or things that sort of keep the family business or the family farm or whatever, keep that
Right.
going. It's not necessarily that type of work. A lot of ours, being in a big city, it's, you work at like a fast food place, you work at a department store, you just
Right.
sort of work at somewhere that doesn't have a connection necessarily to the family or anything like that. Whereas yours, if you have players who are missing for work, it seems like a lot of them, it's very much tied to like obligations tied within their family, that it's not like
Often.
something they can just sort of, be frivolous about or just be dismissive
Right.
of.
And so I want to preface this with saying, I didn't mean to say that kids that grew up in the city don't have a good work ethic. I don't, I'm sure you didn't take it that way, but I don't want it to be taken that way at all. But, where I grew up fishing for my dad commercially, and there were, certainly we didn't fish as hard as the people around us. They fished way harder than we did. They had way more gear to go through, and so I grew up around a bunch of people that were super tough and worked super hard, and it's not to say that we worked hard, but they worked harder, and so I always had this these rivalries with these kids at different schools that I'm like, oh man, they're so tough, they just
Yeah.
they grew up on a boat, and they're just these tough dudes, and you see a little bit of that here too. You got the kids on the east side they're rodeo kids, and I'm like, dang man, they're tough, and so it's unique in that regard, and I know that the city kids are plenty tough, and they have great work ethics as well. It's just a different kind of work a lot of the time.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, typically it tends to skew towards, like you said, where those in probably more rural communities or more rural areas might be, on average, again, this is just in general, probably doing on average more like physically demanding work, necessarily, like where you said, is like maybe takes care of some of the conditioning aspects or some of
Right.
that sort of stuff, doing more of that back-breaking labor more so than maybe other programs have their players doing jobs on, which I think is
I
fascinating.
see it on other teams more. You get those naturally buff kids. I just wonder where they're at on my team. I don't know, but I'm just no. I'm throwing a little shade. I can't do that.
I know. That's funny. Um, are there certain things that you think that you're able to do as a coach in a rural community that you don't think you would be able to do elsewhere? Are there things, and I know that your experience may be a little limited with, no bigger cities and everything like that with your upbringing where you've coached from, but in general, do you think that there's things that you feel like you're just able to do as a coach in a rural community that you're not sure, or you definitely know that probably wouldn't be possible if you were in a bigger area?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, uh, I'm able to be in the gym a lot, and I don't know, I don't know that it's any more than the next coach or than the coach at the other town, but it feels like maybe just because there's not a bunch of competing, we don't have a cheer squad, so we don't have cheerleaders vying for gym time, and luckily this time of year, baseball and softball are mostly outside, track mostly outside, unless obviously there's rain, but that enables me to open the gym quite a bit, right? And so I feel like I can open the gym quite a bit, and have it available for kids, and I my best ability is availability. I just try to make myself as available as possible. By the way, I stole that from somebody. I didn't make it up, but it is really cool. And so I just try to make myself as available as possible to the kids. I obviously, I'm like, if you can do it right after school, that's best. But there's sometimes where it's like, all right, can you open it at 6:30? And I'll kind of begrudgingly say, yeah, of course I can. Of
Yeah.
course, I got nothing else going.
Hey,
Let me
you said about
leave
your
my wife
life,
and
the
kids
life you
here.
live.
But
So there you go.
yeah,
You're
uh, but and also you get a lot more like one-on-one time with kids, because with a bigger program, you might not get that if you have 35 kids in the program or 45 kids or however many, it's harder to build those relationships with the kids. Whereas, I mean, last year I had 7 kids or 8 kids, I should say. One was injured, but 8 kids. This year I had 10 kids. You get a lot of, you're able to spend more time with them and build that relationship and build that trust. And I also have some assistants that are wonderful, and it just feels like we're able to give a lot to the kids, a lot of attention and a lot of time. And so it seems like that could be more, an advantage being in a rural community.
It's probably one where I imagine, and I'll kind of let you speak to it as well. Like it's probably just easier in general just to maybe get to know the kids better, and you kind of get to know their situation a bit better. And I think that in the area that you're in, if like you could kind of learn a lot about a kid like really quickly, like where, once even like kind of the area you live in, you kind of like know, okay, I know exactly like, kind of where the area that they live in. I kind of know what they're
Right.
into. You get to like know their interests a while, versus like, me in my situation, sometimes in a big city, I hear about, the areas or neighborhoods or even the cross streets that my kids live in. And I'm like, I don't know where that is. I have no idea where you are, like
Right.
what's going on, or what the area around you is like. But I feel like maybe that's an advantage that you kind of have. Like you're kind of very familiar, I'm sure, with where most of your kids, kind of what their situation is, kind of where it is they're at. And you could really you kind of almost have a bit of a foundation to start to go off of to really kind of build that relationship with them.
Absolutely. And I try to be involved with the younger group too, the
Mhm.
elementary kids and the middle school kids. So they're not just meeting me when they get into high school, I mean, I think that that's an advantage for me as well. We have it's not like a big school feeder program type of scenario. It's like, no, it's all, this is the only school in town, you're going here, right? So it's really cool. I can meet the kids that are in 5th grade and know that, hey, if I'm still able, I'm going to be coaching you when you're in high school, and hopefully they like that. I think they
Well,
like that. They come out
I
to the
think so
games,
too.
so
Yeah, and what's kind of cool too is I imagine that a lot of these kids, like, they're not moving. They're not really probably going
right.
anywhere in many cases. Like, especially as you mentioned, a lot of these families are generational. So even that kid that starts out, kindergarten or 1st grade, there's a very, very high chance that, well, if you're still around, like you said, then you'll see them in high school. And
Absolutely.
they know exactly where they're going to be going to high school. And that's like, I feel
Yeah,
like such a cool opportunity and such a cool thing to be able to take advantage of.
it is. And I just, I try my best to do my part, because a lot of times you're at a small school, and God forbid you get a coach that doesn't put in the time and doesn't, cultivate the program, and you're kind of stuck, right? So I just try to always be constantly learning and evolving and adapting, and making the best possible version of myself for these kids,
Mhm.
because you want to give them everything and more, everything, teach them everything and more.
Right. And this has made me think now. This is kind of a question that just popped in my mind. And in your experience as you were making your way to North Douglas, and even the community of Drain itself, did you find at all that you had to, I guess for a lack of a better term, kind of like prove yourself? Did you kind of, as like an outsider, just kind of like ingratiate yourself with like with the school and with the players, or did you find that like they were ready to have you there, and you just sort
So
of slid right in?
probably a little bit of both. I think it was such a weird year, because it was the first, the first COVID year
Yeah.
was when I got the job. And so I got the job late. I was one of 2 applicants. I applied on like the last possible day, and we didn't live in this town yet. So we lived up the road 20 miles, but we were moving down here. And so I applied, and they said, "Oh yeah, great, you applied. The other applicant was a parent, and he was just going to do it if nobody else applied. And so, not to say that they gave it to me just because I was the only guy, but I think they were happy to get me in there because I was, had excitement, brought some excitement and everything. But I didn't meet anybody for the longest time because we just weren't able to do parent meetings and to do stuff like that. So even that first year, I was pretty much just like, okay, here's when practice is, and we'll try to cram it in. And I didn't meet a lot of parents the first year. It was kind of bizarre. And so this year felt like this last season felt like the real first year. I was able to have a preseason meeting, able to, go over expectations and rules, and had more kids come out. And, I think that first year was a little bit of a, kind of prove yourself type of scenario. Everyone was kind of keeping me at arm's length, maybe. And maybe because they had to, at least 6 feet apart, right?
6 feet apart from you, yeah.
Maybe because they had to, but also maybe because they were feeling me out. I don't know. And so now I do feel like, and I could be wrong here, but I feel like everybody's kind of on the same page with me and trust me for the most part. And I'm sure there's always somebody who's not always going to agree with everything you do, and you just kind of have to roll with that and be okay with that. That it's not always your fault.
As you mentioned, I mean, you still, in a way, right, kind of feel like you're in that like prove it stage and trying to like get yourself going, and not just sort of being new. And with COVID and everything, there is kind of that sense I get from our conversation that you're like, hey, like I do want to keep continuing to prove myself and kind of establish what I'm trying to get going here.
Oh, absolutely. And that's kind of a, the chip on your shoulder mentality that I think, you hear a lot of players have it, but I kind of have it too. I've always felt like,
it's not a bad thing.
like I'm, I absolutely want to prove myself. And so, I will do my best to outwork and work harder than everybody. And I think that in the end, it's a good thing because it's just setting a good example for the kids. Right. So,
of course.
So I think that it works out in my favor. I don't think I rub anybody the wrong way. I don't try to, at least.
Sure.
I'm sure I do.
Well,
but
I mean, if you're intense and you're passionate, I think that just kind of comes with the territory.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly passionate. I don't know how intense I am, but I'm fairly low key, but I definitely believe in what I'm doing, and I try to do it to the best of my ability, and always try to expand that as like, okay, my best is still getting better too.
Yeah, that's growth mindset too, and all that good stuff that goes with that. No, that's awesome. And something else that just popped in my mind. We've kind of talked about the experiences that your players go through, and kind of the unique experiences that they have, and just being in rural communities and everything. And so a question that just popped to mind is, do you feel like there's a style of basketball, or maybe just a way that maybe from what you either played in or what you like to do as a coach, that you think really plays into like the skill set, or maybe just kind of like the work ethic of the kids you have? I guess, for a lack of a better way to word this, like, do you feel like there's almost like a type of like rural community type of basketball that exists in terms of like play style?
I do, absolutely. So this is, it's a multi-tiered answer here, and I'll do my best to like sum it up nicely. But what I found in Alaska a lot of times is you'd get a lot of helter-skelter basketball, and you'd get a lot of teams that would try to speed you up, and they'd just be better at playing that speed, right? And so they'd speed you up and just play this chaotic basketball, pressing, full court pressing all game, and fast breaking all game, and not always pretty, but usually pretty effective. And then sometimes you would run into a team that was really disciplined, and they would just blow those teams out, right? And so you'd see that quite a bit. You'd also see teams that just they didn't have a ton of talent, but they were tough. And it's like having a team full of football kids that are just like they're running backs, running through there and pushing and fouling. And so there was a lot of kids that were just super tough, always diving on the floor, always high effort. And those are a lot of the styles you would see in Alaska. And of course plenty of others, but you would see that happen a lot, And so I came down here and it's not quite the same, but you still see a lot of the kids that are just super high effort, super tough kids. And I think that, we tried to run this year, not in an undisciplined way, but more of a structured, fast breaking way. And we played up against a couple teams, but one in particular that was just better than we were at that style.
Sure.
And so, you see a little bit of that too. You see a little bit of the run and gun style here. And ultimately we tried to slow them down and we did it fairly successfully. But you see a little wider range of styles down here, I think, from what I've seen. I know a lot of teams slow it down and try to trade possessions with you, which I always felt like, it's okay if you want to do that. But I always favored more of a fast pace. I think it's more fun for the kids, and you can cover a lot of mistakes that way by just playing hard.
You might be bringing a new band of basketball then out to the area. I don't know if that is the case. I don't know what your predecessor was like, but if you're changing things up or not.
And I don't fully know either. Actually, I know that, looking at scores, I know they were in lower scoring games, but I actually, when I was coaching up the road, coaching JV, we brought our team down here and we played against North Douglas. And so it's funny because I'm like, man, did I just block that out? I don't even remember it. I know we lost. I know we lost by 2. I don't remember anything else about it. So stylistically, I don't know. I don't know if it's entirely new. I think it is a little different though. I don't think they ran quite as much before I got here. But as it is though, with just about everywhere, people are really, the game is changing so much. I'm sure they didn't take as many threes as we took either. And that's, everywhere, right?
Everywhere, I'm sure it's like that. Yeah, exactly. That's funny. Do you think that players or teams in your area, and you're in kind of an interesting situation now in Oregon, so you got the Portland area and you got these more bigger cities and everything in Oregon. But do you believe that the players and the teams in your area get a fair amount of exposure, the right amount of exposure, or do you think that there might be more that can be done to draw attention to basketball in rural areas such as the one you're at?
Well, I think that like we're at the 1A level, and the way they do it here is there's 1A, 2A, 3A, 4A, 5A, and 6A.
Yep, that's
okay.
Like Arizona. Yep.
Okay, cool. And so the 1A schools and 1A, 2A level definitely gets less attention. But you see, now we live in the age of Huddle being pretty ubiquitous and NFHS network. Those things like that are just about in every school, or most schools at least. And so usually when there's a good player, he gets seen, even at the smaller levels. I don't know if you remember Luke Jackson. He played at University of Oregon in the mid-aughts, but he was just from up the road. He played at 3A basketball, but he played in the NBA and played at University of Oregon. So it certainly happens. But I think in general, I think 1A and 2A and the lower levels are definitely overlooked. And I think I know I've got a buddy that coaches up in Alaska. They just won the 2A state championship, and one of his players got 2A player of the year. And I'm like, yeah, wouldn't you think people are just knocking down his door to be, it's 2-time player of the year. And people are like, how do we not know of this kid? And going, you haven't been paying attention, right? I mean, so
it may just add another little layer of responsibility almost on your end to, you really can't take anything for granted. You almost have to really fight and almost really make sure that exposure is out there, especially when you feel it's warranted. It doesn't seem like it's a
absolutely.
situation where it's coming to you.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I think as much as it's on the players, it's on the coaches, or more so on the coaches. I mean, how hard are you working to get your players exposure, or are you helping your players fill out prospect questionnaires, or are you sending out emails to coaches, and are you taking them to camps and summer camps, exposure camps, and there's a lot of ways now. I think there are more opportunities now than there were certainly when we were playing, I'm sure, but even than there were 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I think we're getting more and more opportunities. So it's a matter of finding them and making sure that your kids get them. And yeah, this year has been an interesting one, because it's like, is stuff open back up again? Yeah, it is.
Right.
Okay, we got to get on it, and so that's
And that'll
I'm
probably be,
hopeful
yeah.
that I'm getting my kids the right amount of exposure
Well, it'll
that
be really
that they deserve.
it'll be really beneficial, hopefully, as things are starting to really open up and everything. Because I know how many, scouts and evaluators really like to see stuff in person, and there's probably, I would say with fair confidence, maybe a little bit of healthy skepticism on, probably lower levels and about what the level of competition looks like and
Right.
things like that. And, I don't know what this looks like on film. I got to see it in person, but then I haven't been able to see it in person because of COVID and everything. So to have that opened up again, I'm sure
Yeah.
is just a great opportunity for these evaluators to actually see, like, oh, okay, this is what they're about and this is what it looks like live.
Yeah. And I tried to, like last year, I tried to stack our non-league schedules so that it was all higher levels of, 2A, 3A, or 4A. And we did. And that's our whole non-league schedule was that. And I think, it gave the kids an idea of like, oh, this is what their level is. Can we play at that level? And, really getting a taste of it, and hopefully putting some good tape out there against higher levels, better opponents in quotations, because they're not always, but there's the stigma that they are, and often they are. They usually are, but not always.
And for the players too, in particular, if you're in those sort of areas, I think that, as you mentioned, as a coach, you really have to know that, like, for your players, a lot of them are not aware probably of the opportunities and the things that exist out there. Like, you as the coach in those sort of communities more than likely are much more connected with, what is going on in terms of availability and possibilities, like you said, with like camps or things to get exposure and things like that. You really have to be kind of the conduit there to kind of connect those two together, because I mean, even in inner cities and cities I work at, this is the case, but I can imagine in rural areas, like, there's probably just a lot of the maybe the world in general that maybe the players are unfamiliar with, or resources that are available to there, and then that's what makes the coach, so much more valuable.
Yeah. I think that's mostly true. And I think that I do probably have a couple kids that are way more in tune than I am. Like, they play AAU circuit and stuff like that. And that's all stuff that I encourage them to do, but I don't know a whole lot about, because I didn't grow up playing AAU ball. It was like,
Sure.
that didn't exist, and
Yeah.
so at least on the, the Kenai Peninsula of Alaska, it didn't. And so, they might be more in tune to the intricacies of that, and of the, the Twitter sphere or Instagram or TikTok or whatever, however basketball is being shown, which it's that whole world too. I sound like way older than I am, because I just don't, I don't really do a whole lot of social media, but I know that kids share highlights that way, and they get seen that way. And so I'm like, dang, do I need to become this like social media maven so my kids like get a fair shake?
Yeah,
It's so
it's something
not my
I've had to really work
personality.
on. No, it's been the same with me, and I realized that like it's almost like this is what everyone else is kind of is on and doing. It's like, okay, like I really gotta
Right.
for the kids, right? It's for the players. Like, okay, like you
It's
gotta make
for
it
the kids.
happen.
It seems exhausting to me. And I hope I don't sound like a curmudgeon, but I'm just like, oh my
It's
goodness. Like
a whole
I
nother layer
gotta
to the job, right?
I don't even want to add the Twitter app. I'll just look at it through the browser. I'm so lazy. I'm so lazy that way.
It's ever changing, and guess what? In 5 years, 2 years, it'll be something else. It'll be something different. You got to get used to and
Yes.
get to know. And I think that's the
I
most exhausting part, right?
on that, I just need to adapt better, right? I need to adapt.
Yeah, I suppose it's what we tell our kids and our players. They got to be flexible and
Yes,
adapt. Like,
yes.
I guess I got to
Yeah.
practice this when I'm preaching,
I
huh?
gotta walk the walk.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly. That's funny. Awesome. Coach, to wrap up, there's a couple questions I ask every guest. So I'll go ahead and start with this first one here. Thinking back on your coaching career, what is a coaching or a professional moment of yours that you think our listeners would be able to learn from?
So gosh, this is kind of a tough one. And I'm really gonna touch on something that's not specific to anything that I can remember. But I think it's just important to know when to stick to your guns and also when to embrace new ideas. And so this has nothing to do with Twitter and social media, but it's funny that it's kind of piggybacking off of that. But there's going to be a lot of adjustments that you'll need to make game to game and season to season, and life is a series of adjustments, as my father would say. And as you know, your personnel may be suited for one thing when you're used to running another, and you just have to be open to that, and not just like, hey, I'm gonna stick this square peg in this round hole. And you'll have your non-negotiable things, and usually those are kind of your program standards and rules, but also just being open to really to learning and growing, right? I think that's been the most, I don't know, that's not really a professional moment or anything, but it's something that I've been trying to embrace and to learn myself. And so I think it's been great for me to realize that it's like, hey, it's okay to to go one way and then change your mind and go with another way if that's what works, right?
Yeah.
And to always be looking for that optimal thing and philosophy.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I think the way that I guess in general, like people go and they answer that question, because some people it's one particular moment, and then some, like you mentioned, it's kind of like these more bigger, kind of like overarching ideas. Like it's just there's no right way to answer that question. So I found that answer that you gave was really interesting.
Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah. I couldn't pinpoint one moment. There's a lot of career for me yet. I'm sure I
Yeah.
will get one in the near future even, but yeah, nothing
And I hope it's
that
a positive
anybody
one.
else doesn't know about. Oh, me too.
I
Yeah.
hope it is, because I get flashbacks every time I ask that question. It's like, oh no, I know what
Yeah,
mine
yeah,
is. Oh no, but no, it's all
that's
good.
the fear, right?
Yeah,
But
it's all good, but it's
yeah.
all learning. It's all learning experiences. It'd be even worse if it's a bit negative one that you hadn't learned from. I guess
Right,
that would be a much
absolutely.
worse experience, a growing experience. Awesome.
I'm sure people that know me, if they listen to this, they'll be like, dude, why didn't you say
Why do you
that
mention
that
that? Yeah,
one?
there
Why
you
didn't
go.
you mention that time?
That's funny.
So
Awesome. Coach, to wrap up, I give every guest what I call a 60-second soapbox. It's your platform to get out a final message, a closing thought, a closing idea. And don't worry, I'm not timing you. Whatever sort of message you want to leave the listeners with, I'm going to go ahead and give you that platform to do so here. So I'm going to open it up to you and just kind of let you take it from here.
man, I prepared pretty well for you. You sent me some questions beforehand, and I looked them over and made some notes. I did not for this one, and it was by design, because I just go, man, I don't want to I don't want to talk about, I know this was kind of about me, but I don't want to talk about me, but one thing I guess I will say, and it's kind of related to that is that for me as coaches, it's important to remember that it's not about me and it's not about us as coaches. It's about the kids, and especially at the high school level or the junior high or elementary level, it's easy to get caught up in ego. And I would just implore everybody to try to, take a step back every once in a while and remember why you're doing it. And if you're doing it to be a college coach or a pro coach, that's one thing, but it's for the kids, to stop along the way. Right. So, it's my roundabout way of saying that.
Hey, I like it. And never lose sight of what we're doing this for, right? Or who we're doing it for.
Absolutely.
Is the best way to put that. And that is always a good reminder to have. Sometimes it's very easy to get lost in the me part of the coaching thing, as opposed to, why we actually got into this in the first place. So.
And we're all, I'm the vast majority are ultra competitive, and there are times when, I want to win more than anything. And on the other hand, the lesson isn't winning, right? Sometimes the lesson is how to bounce back after a loss or whatever. It might not be winning every game, and it rarely is, right? But it's finding the lessons and the teachable moments in everything you do, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. Coach, I want to thank you for not only sharing that thought, but also just talking a little bit about your experience, your upbringing, playing ball, the rural experience you had not only in Alaska, but here in Oregon, where you teach now. It was really insightful. I got to learn a little bit more about a corner of the world that I otherwise would not have gotten to know about, and just learn a little bit about the area, as well as what basketball looks like in that area, and the things you're doing with the program. And it sounds like things are going in the right direction, and hopefully only going up now that hopefully the worst of all the COVID stuff is behind us. So Coach Leman, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
All right. I appreciate you. Thank you.
And thank you guys so much for listening. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast, and we will see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.